So I would like to call up, we'll call them one by one. So we'll start off. Alex Ceballos, who's the co-founder, CFO, and president of Augur. Give it up for Alex. Matt Fisher, who co-founded Daydream and is now building his next venture. So give it up for Matt. John Rossman, who needs no introduction and is a multi-time author and board member, former EVP at Amazon. Give it up for him. And last but not least, we actually had one of our portfolio companies at 161, the founder, Jeff Haney, flew in from Austin, Texas to be with us here today. So let's give it up for Jeff Haney, founder and CEO of Agentuity. And with that, I'm going to let you guys take it and run from here. Excited to hear this conversation.
All right, what are we talking about? So I thought I would ask, let me pull up my little handy thing. You know, we can't have an AI event and talk about all these amazing technology innovations that we're doing without AI, I thought. So I started with asking Grok, anybody use Grok with a K, the Hitler one? Yeah, that one. I thought I would ask it, on a panel, and what are some really innovative, controversial things to talk to everybody about tonight? And it said, no comment. I mean, literally, that's what it said. Like, it literally came back with nothing. So, but I thought I would open up with just talking a little bit about, we talked a little bit about the future of responsible AI and what's going to happen. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about, maybe ask some questions about what was going to happen with the future as we shift from human-centric, pretty much everything. All the software that we built to date has been very much human-centric. Everything, every part of the stack, right? We built software for humans. But what happens when the next decade plus or longer probably is not for humans? Software needs to be built for software, for intelligent AI, intelligent agents. That's how I always wanted to open it up, and maybe ask you guys, what do you think? What happens? How does the a little bit self-serving for me, but like, how does the infrastructure change? How do the applications change? How do pretty much everything we know about software, how we guide it, how we instruct it, how we build it, maintain it, develop it, et cetera. What happens when it's actual software that's building software? It's software that actually runs and improves and sort of gets in this almost cellular, molecular-like system. I'm going to pass it to my panelists here, my esteemed colleagues.
I'll jump in. I think big question. The big thing for me is the IAM, or the auth and identity piece. I'm talking into the mic now. I think the big piece is the auth and identity aspect of how we build software. When we're looking at agents today, you have A2A and MCP that are talking to each other and infra like that. But the big thing I think that's really undervalued or overlooked right now is, how do agents authenticate with other agents, and then build agents that can authenticate past that in either a private silo, meaning your data, or exposed to a partner-centric data. There's only one group I've seen really tackle that, and it's Arcade. I don't know if arcade.dev is their site. They're really focusing on auth for agents, but that's a piece where traditionally software engineering, like, we're building pieces and components that will compile and then run together, and it's abstracted from the auth component. And with agents, you don't have that, right? Because they're continuing to build over and over, and then copying and mirroring, and they all have to auth into something. That's what has to change. And in parallel, the UX of how we build has to change, right? Like, the UX of predictable programming can't exist anymore. Buttons that do things in one dimension are gone. We have to build these UX experiences that are personalized in real time and dynamic, that can tackle any kind of action the user wants, right? Think about in a commerce setting, a user could ask for help, right? They could ask to buy something, they could ask for reviews and aggregated. All of that can't live in a single button on the page. It has to be instantaneous and either developed through chat, voice, visual cue, whatever it may be. But that UX componentry hasn't really changed, and I'm kind of shocked. We're building in this chat box bubble still with AI, and we could do so much more. So I think those two are really interesting as we talk about like how does this change and what should we think about.
So I don't know if I'm going to answer your question, but Winston Churchill said, "I hope you have questions for my answer." So I don't know if this is a 10-year forecast, but I think it's maybe a shorter-term forecast around this, which is the power we're seeing from AI now is a lot of like essentially sugar hits of personal productivity, and everything, right? Like everybody using it in their job, and it's like, I get 10, 20, 30% more. And I think the next layer of value is going to be able to come in stringing together long, complex, dynamic workflows and outcomes that take a much more dynamic and sensitive approach to being able to adjust to make the right decisions and nuance things. I think about like the space that Augur's in. It's like that fits that type of long form dynamic workflow. And then, and I don't think we're even getting close to pursuing those real, any level of sophistication in those types of scenarios. And then the next one is really like every business has a secret. And if you can really identify what that secret is and get it that much better with AI, like you create tremendous value. You've got a book in front of you called Big Bet Leadership. The subtitle is Your Transformation Playbook for Winning in the Hyperdigital Era. And the hyperdigital era, we start the book with a forecast, which is there are going to be companies that are engineered to be 10 to 100x more productive than their peer company is today. So if you're an insurance company, there will be companies that have 10 to 100x levels of back office productivity than companies today. And I think designing the work to be done and those outcomes and the things that we're truly trying to optimize for in those types of workflows, like that's where real enterprise values and the next great set of companies are gonna come from. And that's why, besides just getting to hang out with the most interesting man in the world, Jim Harding, why I believe in the vision of Autonoma, which is like this ability to have a dynamic, loosely coupled, affordable, skill-based agents that tie together digital with physical robotics, with people and any other type of actor. I have two boys, both computer science software engineers now, and I was just talking to them about I've been kind of in the systems integration business for 40 years now, and integration is still the bitch, right? Like you essentially still, everybody, like you have a business analyst, we agree on the business protocol. We have a technical analyst, we agree on kind of the syntax of how things happen. That still happens essentially the same way today as it did flat files, EDI, XML, like all the chain. And I think when we solve that nut, when the cost of integration goes to 1/10 what it is to 1/100th what it is today, oh man, then the world's going to open up for integration.
I think they said everything. So I'll take a different angle. But what you said about, where software meets the real world, like the physical world, which is what we're doing, that's where it gets complicated. And because there hasn't been a focus on software sort of doing something together with the physical world, we're working on supply chain end to end. And those boats, when they come from China or Thailand or whatever it is to bring the products to the US, what happens all throughout the supply chain until the products get to your front door? That's what we're trying to solve with AI. What we're doing today, it's sort of a self-contained system. So our agents, and Jim alluded to, agents, managing agents. We are doing that. We have, we call an orchestrator, super agent, who is managing a multitude of agents below him or her. And so we are self-contained, or it, whatever. And so we're self-contained. The interesting part is going to be when when AI starts getting, and it's already kind of going in that direction, into industries that are more sensitive. What happens when it gets into healthcare? What are they doing? With what's going on with the geopolitical situation, what happens, like now, there are rumors, and I'm sure that there are not only rumors, that, bad actors are collecting information. Before, it took the NSA a ton of time to collect information about us. Today, they probably can do it very quickly. And the issue is that you have actors in other countries doing the same, and they're not always aligned, as we know. I think that's the most scary part. Yes, there's going to be fraud. Yes, there's going to be, people getting their money stolen and all that. But the real scary thing to me is what happens when AI gets into healthcare and when it crosses borders and, people start using it to leverage politics, get into wars and things like that. That's the part that I'm probably most concerned about.
Okay, that was a really great opening set of answers. Let's go to something even more simple. What is an agent? Isn't an agent just a chatbot? Whoever wants to take that one.
Yeah, I've been trying to figure that out to some degree, and it's hard to distinguish between, workflow and RPA and agentic, but I think to me, it really comes down to not having to script hard-coded rules relative to it, and it adjusts relative to the situations while given an optimization formula.
Yeah, that is a very good question. The way I think about it, it's a smart entity. And you need to feed that entity or provide the underlying foundation, hydrating ontologies in our case, providing, tons of information so that agent can do exactly what you said. It's basically, and Jim said that we're not at the point of reasoning yet. Within what we're doing, and it's a very small space from the perspective of AI, but we believe that we're getting to the point that agents can reason and give a more precise, more accurate answer than what exists today. And the definition of agent for me is like, basically, this smart entity that can do and help the human do something that they couldn't do before, and do it real time, taking a holistic view on the entire organization. Because today, the world mostly, especially in supply chain, operates in silos, and they're not interconnected. And that's what we're trying to accomplish.
I explained this to my 3-year-old son because he asked what I do for a living. And I said, it's a piece of software that understands context and can adjust an answer based off of what you tell it. And I think he still didn't get it. He's 3, but that's the most simplistic version I think we have, which is context matters. And in a chatbot, it's a binary tree flow, and you tell it what it needs to say.
So just dovetailing back on the identity, I think that's a really big issue and an opportunity as well. One of the things we're seeing pretty early on with some early customers is that you think about an agent kind of like we think about APIs or other pieces of software, fairly predictable, fairly well-defined with the task. But what happens when agents become their own thing, and will they become their own thing? And what happens to identity? A lot of what we're seeing right now is borrowed identity, I call it, where it's like I'm giving the identity of some user or some system to the agent to do work on its behalf. But we're pretty quickly seeing customers saying, well, isn't this just like a digital employee? Some people call it digital twins, but I think that mirrors too much of like twinning or replicating what I do as a person versus like an independent entity. How do you guys see the role as we see agents go from like things that we are kind of controlling and providing some level of guidance but still fairly agentic, to something that maybe becomes something that's self-learning, self-replicating, self-building? It can sort of start to plan its own future, if you will. And what does identity look like in that world?
No doubt, teams will have people, robots, pure digital agents, and that's why I think the definition of what a team does and what its inputs and outputs are, really engineering team level capabilities is going to become even more important in the future, so that whether it's a person, a robot, or a pure software agent, it can do exactly what we're saying, which is A, do the job to be done, B, get better at doing it and everything. So I don't know if I'm answering the essence of your question, but I think it's the real nut isn't just in solving that technical issue, but actually how do you get these units to do the bidding and be coordinated across an enterprise and across multiple enterprises. Then that's kind of the macro level team unit optimization question.
Okay, I've thought a lot about this actually. I think the holy grail of what we're building now is the ability for software to think on its own, to replicate, to have context and understanding, and to do it in a confined space, right? A manner that you're putting it in a box, basically. We're not opening Pandora's box yet. We will get to a place where I think you have to have digital team members, digital friends, digital peers, digital religious leaders, like all of these things that exist in our reality that we have today have to evolve into this space where we are, because the way that we operate in our daily lives is shifting, right? Like, not every team can be together in person, but you know that brainstorming in person is the best possible scenario you can have. So how do you replicate that? Well, maybe you take the persona of a coworker and you clone them into an agent, and then you have a physical robot that can stand in the room and you can have a conversation with them and brainstorm. Maybe you take your team and create agents that replicate them, and in your hiring process, you have a candidate talk to them and see how they fit into the culture. Right? All of these applications are starting to come out. I think the gray area or the middle line is how much autonomy do you give it, right? RL, or reinforcement learning, is the process of taking what you learn, putting it back into the system so it gets smarter. We're doing that with agents. But what we're not doing is saying your instruction set is being thrown away, go live and be wild. Now, there's research labs that are doing that, and they've proven that agents are creating their own language and talking to each other that we as humans can't understand, and holy shit, that's scary. But hopefully they stay in the labs, right? I think for the practical use cases, you have to lean into, this is not just a piece of software, this is now an employee, and how do I either upskill or move skills of my current employees so I can offset, or do I need that full staff any longer? And those are hard conversations, but that's the reality, right? We have to think that way.
Yep. I actually have seen demos where you have that persona being cloned, and they're pretty scary because it looks just like you talking to you. So that exists today. What I believe is agents are going to be as smart as the information that you feed them, so that they can adjust, reason, and understand context. So how much context you feed into them, that's sort of going to be the limiters. The big thing is going to be when you have the big platforms, the Anthropic, the OpenAIs and all that, where you have almost unlimited data. And if you're creating your agents to be trained on that data, it's like, where are the limits? Where are the guardrails? That is going to be the scary part. I think companies that are going to be building agents with small language models and various domain-specific models, I think that's not going to be such an issue. The issue is going to be the ones trained on the LLMs. And because it comes, they're going to be really having a dependency on whatever OpenAI does. And we've seen that already where, I read that one of the employees at OpenAI tried to shut down the model, and the model was doing things so that it wouldn't be shut down. So that's, because the amount of information that agent is being fed is, unbelievable. So, but that's going to be, I think it's going to be a few players that feed that model, and that's a part that needs to have some guardrails.
Can I add one more? One thing I also mentioned is, we're not at the point yet where these models have memory, right? Like long-term memory. They're good at recalling things you explicitly tell them, and they're okay at implicitly trying to pull apart who you are, but they don't have memory in the same way our brain works. I became kind of fascinated with this a year ago. There's a study called biomimicry, which is like, how do you look at nature learn from it, and then apply it to something else. It's common with like how color on a bird's feather helps them shield from the sun, so you can think of heat reduction, and industries build it. And I got really fascinated with the human brain, and I'm in no way a neuroscientist, but I went really deep on how do we store memories. They're not flat memory files like we see in LLMs today, not a single event, but they're a chain of events. Like when you wake up in the morning, you smell a cup of coffee, maybe you picture something from 20 years ago, and that brings you an emotional feeling, right? That's what separates us from these agents. The memory piece is just not there yet for a lot of the things I mentioned, and we're mentioning to actually become a in-production reality. When that memory function does exist, meaning it is a perfect understanding of all of the senses you want that agent to see, feel, hear, taste in the future, and connect it back to the outcome, that's when we hit that tipping point. I think we're not far off from it, but that long-term memory recall and understanding of what an actual memory should do, that's kind of the gap we have from all of these things actually being in production. I think Gemini is probably the closest at having a solid understanding of memory. The rest of them are a little ways off, which is why they hallucinate quite often, because they forget that there's associations that are happening, but we're getting there.
Okay, let's stay on the LLMs for a second. Right now, we have a handful of hyperscaler LLM models, foundation models, frontier models, whatever you want to call them. And we're starting to see the emergence. Certainly OpenAI a couple weeks ago or last week started with open source models and weights. Will we have, yeah, exactly. That's a really great opportunity there, I think. Will we have, for all of human knowledge and recall and expertise and all this, we have one or two or three companies that own digital humanity, or we have something that looks much more maybe different than software has been to date, which is like decentralized, maybe open source, maybe fine-tune or even specialized models for certain types of capabilities or skills or industries, et cetera. What's going to happen? What's your prediction?
My prediction is that there will be thousands of specialized models that go very deep and expert, and then some horizontal models that kind of go the breadth but don't do the expertise.
I think it's too early to say if we'll have 1 or 3 or 5 mega hyperscalers, and I think their models are almost irrelevant in my mind. It's who has the integrations and connections into their stack that will matter, right? To be honest, most of the models are operating in a very similar way, and no one truly understands what a transformer does. It's still very complicated. As we figure that out, all of these ops around it, so look at how Microsoft is building their ecosystem with Azure, right? They have a whole bunch of series of models, and they're betting on all of them because they know that you can swap one in and swap one out when it makes an evolution. But the integrations that they have into their data storage and their compute, that's what's going to matter. And so I think whoever's going to win this is the one that can build the best ecosystem that you can plug into, whether it's LLMs or SLMs or small language models, closed source or open source. I hope it's all open source so we can tune our own weights and figure that out, but I don't know. So maybe one of them will build that ecosystem. I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think the whole thing about 1 or 2 or 3 or 5, 10 dominating the world, I think that's a wild card. 5 years from now, perhaps less, I think there are going to be many DeepSeeks. These things are going to evolve to a point that I believe is going to become a commodity. I think the most important piece is, like Matt said, is the data layers. Whoever controls those data layers, because you're going to find commodity on how to train more agents and all that, but whoever has control of the data layer, that's who is going to dominate a specific space.
I think we do have someone here that knows Transformers, Lee Dang there. He's Microsoft Research. I think you probably know a little bit about that, right? Just kidding. Well, let's move to a more controversial topic. So I think we're all here, innovators, investors, founders, building the future, thinking about what's happening for the future, how to make humanity better. But there's a lot of people out there, a lot of technology people, but a lot of non-technology people that are terrified of what's going to happen in the future. What's your prediction? Is this going to be net positive for humanity? Or 10 years out, are we going to have some pretty scary things? Not that there's a one or the other. It's probably a little bit of both. But like, what's your over/under, bull case, bear case for humanity, and as it relates to AI?
Yeah, I'd be an overwhelming optimist. While, like any technology tool or whatever, it'll be used for good and bad, and it'll be the constant defense between will be a big part of the industry and opportunity. But I think the history of how we're wired is that there will be a lot of very good things for business and for society and for our country to come out of this and stuff. So I'm a bull.
Yeah, I am too. I fully believe it'll be net positive for humanity. I think the interesting piece in the next 5 years will be, will there be regulation? What will it look like? And how will it slow, if there is regulation, how will it slow down the growth? But there's only upside in my mind. There, of course, will be bad actors. That's with any technology that comes out, but there's much more opportunity.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm a super bull. I think that this is going to change, for centuries to come. I think it's going to change how humanity actually works and relate to each other. And I think in terms of, it's going to be very painful, and we are seeing that already. It's going to be very painful, but so was every evolution of technology throughout history. Industrial revolution, you name it. It's been very painful. People have to adapt, and there's no other choice. But once it adapts, I think it's going to be super, super positive for humanity. Now, yes, there will be bad actors. Yes, we need some form of regulation for certain things. And hopefully that will catch up fast enough before it's too late.
I'll take the bookcase even further, which is, we live on the West Coast, and if you think about who the winners of kind of the last 30 years of the digital transformation have been, it's been kind of the two coastlines, right? The West Coast and the East Coast, and part of this country feels like it got skipped over, and it literally is flyover in both physical and technical terms. And I think the bull case on this is like we balance out the opportunity a lot more across the country, and it benefits everybody in every community. And I think that's the where we should have a thesis of like, how do we not just continue kind of this truly digital divide between the two coasts.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, let's talk about in some ways AI levels the playing field. We've all talked a little bit about that, and provides maybe human knowledge to everyone on the planet, maybe and potentially reasoning at some point. We also have to balance, like Jim said, AI ethics. That's a really challenging thing, especially in this kind of world that we live in, where this has such profound implications. A lot of technology has certainly impacts to industry and different sort of parts of society, but maybe this is so a society at large. Everything gets impacted, not just business, but pleasure, leisure, everything. But bringing it back to business. When sort of code becomes free, and we're probably rapidly approaching the ability for coding agents to build and maintain and do software, still very early on, and knowledge to some degree becomes free, at least at the foundation level, what does a business have left if you're maybe a traditional business, maybe not a innovative startup, but you're a JP Morgan or you're an insurance company? What's left? What do you have left, especially when the AI starts taking and augmenting humans' ability to work? What happens?
I think it gets back to the basics of kind of value propositions, IP, distribution, customers, and a great team, including all of our digital actors that work against that. And I think that's why this will be like, well, part of the dystopia can be about like just a few big companies winning from this. I actually believe it will be that, and a great opening for mid-market companies to have access to the technology that has really been to the affordability and the purview of really big companies and companies that go for it from a big investment standpoint. So I think it lowers TCO and the ease of integration and the ease of operations from technology so that every company can just compete on the basis of value proposition, IP, distribution, customers, and creating something that works.
Data and latency. That's what they have, right? Your data becomes your moat, and your moat becomes what you have an advantage over on others, and your latency, which is your speed and how you execute on it. Everybody's playing with the same deck of cards, right? Like anybody in here can call OpenAI or Claude or Gemini and build some wrapper or build something unique from the ground up, but the data that you have that's unique that others can't get access to so you can train, that's what's different, and the speed at which you could do it. Those two, I think, are the differentiators that we'll see kind of widen over the next 10 years.
So I believe that businesses will adapt just as humans do. And obviously, businesses are run by humans. And they'll find a new value proposition. They'll find something else where they can create value. But to your question about what happens to businesses, like JP Morgan specifically, interesting enough, I asked that question to a managing director friend of mine. I used to be a long time ago, worked for JP Morgan, as a matter of fact. And he told me, like, we're going to be so much more productive. We can do this and this and this. Now I don't need 10 analysts. And I asked him, what's going to happen 10, 15 years from now if you don't have analysts? What's going to happen? Who's going to be the next managing director if you get rid of all of them? So he kind of like, went back and said, well, we'll probably have some of the best. So basically, the signal and the thesis there, like, we'll hire a smaller workforce that is going to be much more productive, and the rest will have to adapt, unfortunately. But they will still be there.
Can I add one other thing? I'm going to play the antagonist to my bull theory of AI, but it's not an all or nothing game in this, right? I don't personally believe it's you say yes to it and then you ship all of your full-time staff away. The power struggle for what AI is going through and like actual power to put it together and have it shipped to your PC or your Mac is real. And I think that there will be issues with maybe models not performing. And what happens then, right? Like what happens when you have digital analysts and all of a sudden you can't access your model and you're running financial systems that matter down to the quarter of a millisecond, right? Like you need humans for that. Like there's an artisan of what a human can do, an artisan aspect of what a human can do versus a machine, where the power we need to survive and think is very different than the power you need for that. And so as that's all getting sorted out, you have this fallback of like real people doing real shit.
That's good. A little cheeky of a question, but just to spice it up a little bit, we saw a couple of weeks ago, I think chief scientist of OpenAI was offered like $1.25 billion by Zuck. He's not in the room, is he? Is he in the room? Anybody hear about this? $1.25 billion supposedly for to go to work for Meta. I'm sure there's some Meta people in here, and he turned it down. And I thought it was really interesting. I saw two really funny responses, and I want to ask you guys the same question. I saw two really funny responses to that quote online. The first one was, what did he see over at Meta that he turned down $1.2 billion-ish for 4 years? I thought it was pretty funny. The even funnier one was like, what did he see or what did he know about at OpenAI that he wouldn't leave? So what do you guys think?
Thank you. I think somebody finally realized that it's not all about money. There are other things in life that, you fight all your life to get to something, and then you realize that actually money doesn't solve the real problems. Because when you have a lot of money, there are things that money cannot solve. Family, health issues and things like that just cannot solve it. and it doesn't bring happiness. So my sense, I mean, it's, you think about it and you say, why not just give up 4 years of your life and then go live happy ever after? But, I applaud him and commend him for doing that.
I think it's just such a great, salacious headline. I don't know if there's anything to really comment or take away for normal people, and everything. He obviously had some rubric or evaluation of why he wouldn't do that. It's a crazy amount of money. It's hard to understand why they'd say no, but yet there's some very rational reason why. But it's kind of click oriented, right? So
It is, absolutely. But it's interesting, and maybe just to stay on the human talent side of this, there's a huge talent war right now in AI. And on the backdrop of we're talking about mass dislocation of human labor. Like, how do we reconcile that?
Softball questions. I don't know. That's a real answer, right? Like, I think that the application of AI is moving into all verticals, right? Like everything. You can't expect it to change certain things like fantastic pizza from Lee. Like, that's an artist who's making great food. But maybe there are things that can help with it, right? Like how to offset some of the other factors there. I think it's a very large bubble in the AI space of what talent is going through. I fully believe it is a bubble. And for me, like, this is self-deprecating a little, but as I'm an engineer, I think engineers will become less relevant in the next 2 to 5 years. And I think those who have art, history, music, language, and product management skills will become the real players. And so where we're seeing labor ups and downs, I think it's going to shift dramatically. Because again, as systems get smarter, you need different nuances to give to it. So kind of half answer.
Here's, I get asked in a lot of contexts, like, hey, what's your advice for young people and everything, career, life, whatever, and it's like, there's lots of good out there, but mine would be chase hard problems, right? There's never going to be a world where there's not hard problems to solve, and if you become adept at being able to, how to understand a problem, articulate it, bring others along with you, test and learn, like in whatever context, whether that's software, logistics, or social problems, like just, be a problem solver, run towards problems, and that's the best thing you can do for your career, is be somebody who doesn't know, like, oh, that person ran a great P&L, versus I was a partner at a restructuring firm for 12 years, and it's like turning shit around is where you really become a good operator, and where I think there's actually, like, there's a lot more beta there and everything, right? Like, that's a fun game to play. So be a problem solver in whatever kind of job category that you're in, and I think there'll always be work there. That's my hope, at least. Sorry.
Thank you, Matt. I'm an engineer too. Now I feel less valuable. So that's a very interesting question. The thing is, I believe that some of that may be happening already. If you look at the labor data, unemployment and all that, everybody says the economy is going strong because they're looking at, net adds of employees. There's another KPI down there that people are not paying too much attention to. It's like how many people have been without a job for 6 months or more, and the trend is not pretty. It's going up and up and up. Now, is that due because of AI and we became super productive overnight, or is that because uncertainty and tariffs and all that? What's going on? I believe it's a mix of both, and probably more productivity. I mean, the tariffs thing just came on just a couple of months ago, but this has been going for more than a couple of months ago, right, or 3 months. So there's something underlying the economy that we need to keep an eye on, and it's that KPI.
Yeah, probably since 2008, it seems like. Okay, last question as we wrap this up. If we were to look forward, if you were to look forward 10 years, I know it's impossible in this world today, how things are moving so fast. What is one thing we will have done this year to make it better in 10 years? And what's one thing as an industry we'll have done to really mess this up?
Well, one thing we'll do to mess it up would be state-by-state answers that are around any kind of legislation, but AI legislation. I think that would be one thing we do to mess it up. And one thing that I think in 10 years we'll say, gosh, I'm glad we did this, which is essentially making the US stack the ubiquitous stack across the rest of the world. I think that will end up, again, there'll be some pain points relative to this and everything, right? And some unintended consequences. But I think in general, it's on the whole much better if the US defines and runs and engineers the standard which the rest of the world runs on. But that's an opinion.
I'll echo in 10 years, one thing we'll probably look back on and say, shit, we got it wrong, is the legislation piece. And by not taking the right time to do it, I think moving too fast is what we're going to be like, shit, we really messed that up. Because there's so many things that you have to think through. And the EU AI Act is one example where they moved really fast to push it, and they got a bunch of blowback because engineers said, we just won't build in the EU. Right? Those things we have to be really cognizant of. The one thing I think we'll look back in 10 years and say we got it right is killing text as the major input in all of technology. I am very bullish on text will die in the next, we'll call it year, as a majority of input, and it will be voice, and it will be visual, and it will be other sensor-driven items, and that I think we're very close to see. I mean, look at Google's trends on how many people are using voice mode and how many people are using text input. So we will look back and say, thank God we did that.
I agree with that. Personally, I think that the one thing that I would love to see 10 years from now, when I look back, is that AI has revolutionized truly the creation of new drugs. That the diseases that we see today, cancer and all that are killing people, become something like a fever, a flu, 10 years from now. That dementia goes away.
All right, let's give it a round of applause for everybody. Thank you so much.